Okay, we're going to be testing this Cast King 15-pound braided fishing line. We're going to be testing 3 rigs dry, and I got 3 rigs soaking in the water for at least 2 hours. The dry is represented by 1 fishing bead, and the wet rigs are represented by 2 fishing beads. After that, we're going to do the same thing with abrasion. We're going to test it wet against dry. So we're testing to see if this 15-pound fishing line matches the label. So this meter should reach 15 pounds. Here's test 1, 15-pound Cast King Destron braided fishing line, represented by the orange fishing bead. In order for this to pass, this meter has to reach at least 15 pounds. Let's give it a shot. Applying pull force tension. Getting tight. Getting tight. Here you can see on test 1 of the dry braided fishing line, it reached 15.9 pounds of tensile strength. So that's a pass. Okay, we're doing test 2 of the Cast King braided fishing line, 15 pounds. And once again, this is the dry fishing line. We still got the wet rigs over here soaking. Okay, test 2, dry braided fishing line. Looking for 15 pounds, at least. Okay, here on test 2 of the dry braided fishing line, once again we got a winner, 15.7 pounds of tensile strength. Let's write that down, 15.7. Looking good so far. Now remember, coming up, we're going to see if the wet braided line holds up better or worse than the dry braided line. I've done these tests before, and a lot of people say you got to try it wet, so we're trying it wet. You're the boss here. Okay, we're doing test 3 of the dry braided fishing line, 15-pound braided fishing line, Cast King Destron. All right, let's see how we do here. Okay, here you can see we fell just short on the tensile strength. It should have read 15 pounds. It came to 14 pounds. Now we're going to test the exact same braided fishing line, but fishing line has been soaking for over 2 hours. Let's see if it makes a difference. Applying pull force tension. In order for this to be a pass, this meter has to reach at least 15 pounds. The first test of the wet braided fishing line fell below the rated 15 pounds. 14.4 on wet 1. And we'll go over these numbers at the end. Take a closer look at them. We're testing this Cast King braided fishing line. If you see 2 fishing beads, then we're testing the wet braided fishing line that has been soaking for over 2 hours. Okay, here we go on wet 2. Wet 2. Wet 2 broke a 13.4 of tensile strength. Write that down, 13.4. Now in previous videos, a lot of viewers said the wet braided fishing line will do better. So far in the first two tests, it's doing worse. Remember, we're going to be checking the abrasion resistance of dry versus wet on the actual structure that you find in the water. This riprap rock is what they use around bridges, docks, and piers. Okay, we're doing the abrasion testing on this Cast King Destron 15-pound braided fishing line. We got 3 dry rigs here. And you can see they all got the fishing beads and the color we've been doing all the test. Red, green, and blue. And we also have the wet braided fishing line that we've been soaking for over 2 hours. And that's in here. Hopefully they're not all tangled up. But they are also marked with red, green, and blue fishing beads. If you could see that under the lighting. So the claim, just like many others, is that it's got a great abrasion resistant fishing line. So let's see if they do. Here you can see we are testing with the same types of structure that you will actually find in the water around bridges, docks, and piers. This rock is called riprap. So we got the first test here with the red fishing bead. I'm hoping for about 3 cycles, but let's see what happens. Down and up is 1 cycle. Let's try it out. 1. Let's try it out. 1. Not even 1 cycle. Okay, the second test, and this, once again, this is dry braided fishing line. Going with the green fishing bead. You can see that's on there pretty good. Test 2 of the dry braided fishing line abrasion test. Down and up is 1 cycle. I'm not even putting a lot of force. If you're fighting a big fish, a 5 or 6 pound tog or a fluke or a bluefish, he's putting a lot more force on that line with the rubbing than I am putting here. So let's try it. 1. One cycle. Or less than 1 cycle. Red, green, and now we got the blue. Let's go. Let's go. It just breaks like it's paper. Hopefully this gives you a different perspective than when these guys are testing it with sandpaper. Okay, we're going to go with the soaked braided fishing line. There's the green. Here's the blue. And we start with the red. Red, green, blue. Okay, so a lot of viewers suggested that if the line is wet and soaked, it will do better. All 3 of these dry braided fishing lines went less than 1 cycle. Let's see what we get here with the red fishing bead. Less than 1 cycle on the first test. Green's next. Wet braided fishing line, test 2. It just breaks right off. Less than a half a cycle. Finally, the blue wet braided fishing line. Down and up is one cycle. At this point, I'm hoping for 1 or 2 cycles. Less than 1 cycle. Now, if your fish gives up the second you hook it and swims right towards you, you don't have to worry about your braided fishing line snapping. But if you're hooking that fish and he's diving down in the rocks or diving around the tree branches or any type of structure under the water, you got to think about this braided fishing line snapping and you losing the best fish of your life. Let's go over some test results. The first 3 tests of this Cast King 15-pound braided fishing line, we tested the dry braided line. The tensile strength did pretty good for 15-pound line. When we tested this same line being soaked for over 2 hours, the tensile strength was actually lower. Considering we used a Palomar knot on these tests, the Palomar knot will reduce the line strength anywhere from 5 to 10%. So if we could test this fishing line without a knot, then these numbers would have been a little higher. But we test this fishing line as fishermen actually use them. All fishermen use fishing knots when they're fishing. I would like to see this manufacturer test these with fishing knots so it breaks 15, 16, 17 pounds. But overall, the Cast King braided fishing line did okay on the tensile strength. As far as the abrasion test, once again, we test with actual structure that you're going to find in the water. We tested the dry fishing line, and we got about 1 cycle, which I think is below par. Once again, viewers asked to test it with wet fishing line, so we soaked the fishing line, and the results were basically the same. Dry and wet, both 1 cycle or under, which is very poor. So we're rating the abrasion resistance on this fishing line below par. Wait, do not spool your reel yet. We just tested Berkley X9 braided fishing line, and what happened shocked me. If this line fails, it could cost you the biggest fish of your life. Is Berkley lying to fishermen, or is this braid unstoppable? Click this video now before your next fishing trip and find out.